NNRG.
Okay, a couple things before we get started today. First of all, I finally got the palette sorted out. You might have noticed with the first couple of videos, there was kind of a discrepancy between the palette of the intro and the credits and everything versus the gameplay. Well, it turns out that the palette I was using, or am using, specifically the Collidor palette as it's known as, isn't implemented in my emulator properly, so I had to go in and manually adjust all the palette values, so that was interesting. But now it should be identical colors between all the title sequence stuff and everything in the gameplay itself. Because the palette I'm using here seems more reminiscent of what I remember. Even though it just feels more Commodore 64, this one. The other palette that was using before was a little more saturated, and I seem to recall that Commodore 64 graphics tended to have more of a mutedness to it. But anyways, other than that though, kind of gotta be careful what you wish for, because I took a quick look at this game today to make sure I could get it running properly, and I don't think we're going to be able to see much of this. But it was voted on, and I do have it working, so let's just dive in. So let's get this thing auto-started here. Gonna go through loading process. I actually don't think there's raster bars with this one, if I'm remembering from when I tested earlier. Oh, right. I almost forgot, though, that the intro sequence for this one flickers. Also, it's got some very questionable stuff at the bottom there. Actually, I'm gonna go through the recording afterwards, make sure I read that wrong, because if I read it right, then I'm probably gonna have to blank it out. But anyways, so yeah, this is not much of an intro, so let's just go past this. There we go. And yeah, I got a little B in the corner. Don't know what it's for. We're not at warp speed right now, so it's clearly doing something that's not loading related. And then the screen goes weird, and here we go. Okay, so today's game, The President is Missing, is kind of a weird one. So when we first start up here, we get this clock setting procedures on first run, press return. So yeah, basically this is almost like the password system of the game. Sort of. So we're just going to hit return because we haven't made any progress. You would type stuff in here if you've actually made progress in the game. And I haven't played this before. It's just I've read through the documentation, because the moment I got to this screen right here, I realized this wasn't something that was going to be simple. And sure enough, this game is not. So I'm not really sure how to explain this very well, but this is kind of this is basically a game where you're playing the role of a CIA investigator, so to speak, or just an investigator in general. I don't know if you actually work for the CIA or something in this game, but the idea is the president's gone missing as a result of being abducted from some conference that had a bunch of world leaders or something. I do recall from my testing that at the very first minute, there's going to be a bulletin coming in. Yep, there it is. Right on cue. And so when a bulletin comes in, you press the F7 key. And that's supposed to answer the bulletin, but it doesn't seem like there's any particularly useful information here. Because, like, I mean, if we just hit enter right now, it just draws the screen and then gives us some different information in the middle. So yeah, the idea is we're playing the role of an investigator trying to figure out who kidnapped the president. And the way you do this is through a variety of means. The game itself would have come with an audio tape that you would listen to, and the audio tape would have all kinds of like news recordings and stuff to give you sort of just hints as to where you might start your investigation and everything. And then I think there was also like a ransom note or something included with the package as well. Like the manual doesn't actually give you a whole lot to go on. And yeah, it beeps every time a minute passes. I don't know if the game time like passes any faster than this, like if you can actually advance time forward or anything. But yeah, the manual is very in-universe, so it's kind of difficult to tell if there's supposed to be anything more than just the manual and the stuff that would have been included with the game. So yeah, just to give you an example, the very start of the manual here says, "The president is missing and presumed kidnapped by persons with hostile intent toward the United States of America. With these words, an adventure of global proportions and diabolic intrigue begins. On June 6, 1966, in the smallest country in Europe, the largest terrorist action ever conceived was flawlessly executed, and within minutes, the president and the leaders of 10 nations of Europe were abducted. Where they were taken, by whom, and whether they are safe, no one can say. An unidentified voice on a tape claiming responsibility and issuing a list of possible demands is the only starting point in an investigation of unprecedented dimension. The case of characters ranges from the most powerful figures, Washington, to dangerous figures in terrorism. And it goes into a list of particular people and says, you're the investigator, the world is in your hands. And then it gives you kind of a 7-step procedure as to what you should be doing. Should examine the dossiers, study the aerial and satellite photos, control 8 field agents who can go undercover anywhere in the world, listen very carefully to the audio evidence tape to discover the secrets, which we don't have, so we're not going to be able to make any progress, decipher the coded message that may hold the ultimate truth, monitor the events of world crumbling into chaos, and remember your independence, no one is above suspicion. So yeah, with this screen right here that we're looking at right now, what's going on is we've got news reports at the top, we've got case and day information at the middle there, along with lights to indicate if there's a communication coming in, which can either come from the State Department, from an agent that we have out on the field, or from a news bulletin. And then the middle section there, that just displays, for the moment, just staff memos every time it comes up, but I think it can also display like other information. And then we have a request line. And the idea is there's basically 4 specific commands that we can issue here. So one of those commands is files. And so this brings up either we can go to photographic files that we have, confidential files, or case pending files. So photographic brings up a list of pictures that we supposedly have. But the thing is that I've looked at a couple of these and they don't really seem to be much of anything. Like if we go, say, the North Adriatic Sea, so 04, it says find counter number and press return. Now, I don't know what it means by counter number. Like, I haven't read through all the documentation, just enough of it to get a basic idea of what this game's all about. But the thing is that you can't really put in a number here. You just have to press return. And when you do, you get this garbled mess. And a part of me is wondering, like, maybe this is not the way it's supposed to be. Like, part of me feels like this is actually wrong. Especially since, like, from this screen, you're supposed to be able to zoom in with the F3 key, which we can indeed do. And you can scroll the zoom around using the joystick. And then we can zoom back out with the F3 key again. But yeah, we can also show this text information, but it's just a garbled mess. And you use the restore key to go back from any screen that you're on back to the main system here. So if we go back to files again, we're going to see that another section we have here is confidential. But if we try to access this, they're basically 2 special files, an NSC file and a CIA file, and we can't access either of them because they need a password, and if we try to put in a code of any kind, it's just going to say access denied. Now, there's supposed to be a way to hack into these, because you're not supposed to get access to them under normal conditions. If we go back into files again, we go to case pending, we can either select an old file or select a new file, so I don't think we have any old files, so we go new file, and then this just lets us type stuff in. I'm just pushing random keys. And I think the idea is that you can, this is basically like a memo pad. It lets you write stuff down and then save it for later. Okay, so the other commands we can do. We can also do agent, which brings up a list of the 8 agents that we have out there. And then we select the agent number, and it says that they're receiving. And now we have to give them a command. And the way the documentation lays this out in terms of commanding your agents is that you basically have to tell them, you're indicating a person, place, or thing to them. And you have to be pretty exact about it. So I don't know like what any of the actual persons, places, or things in this game would be, so it's kind of difficult to put anything in here. Like, I mean, if I try to say, I don't know, Pentagon. So it's like communicating a little. Okay, apparently it accepted that. So yeah, that agent's now out on the job, and the amount of time it takes to get anything done is going to vary. Like, I didn't think that would actually work, but maybe the Pentagon really is a place you can send one of your agents to investigate. Because from what I understand, the inner story going on here is supposed to be very, very suspect, as in, like, there's supposed to be, like, people within the government, like, working to ensure that the president gets kidnapped and the demands get met and everything. So, yeah, there's supposed to be, like, some double agent stuff going on and everything. And then another command we have here is codes. And this is supposed to be used to decode stuff. Now, there's a transposition screen where you're supposed to type in the coded material in its original form, which we don't have, so we don't know what this is supposed to look like. And it's supposed to decode it to some degree, but yeah, so change letters to numbers, no. Change numbers to letters, no. Add to the letters, let's say add 0, 5. Subtract X from letters, 0, 3. Reverse letter order per word, no. Per text, say yes. Reverse word order. So yeah, the idea is that you're supposed to use these techniques to try and figure out what these coded messages are. And there's also an Enigma machine thing, which is supposed to be very similar, except it's decoding as you encode your stuff. So, like, I mean, if we type in something... Oh. Okay, apparently this one isn't working properly. That, or, it says type in coded material, and will translate on the screen if it is, but the cursor stopped flashing. So maybe that one's not working properly? I don't know. But the last thing in the code section, well, there's also send to CAD, which enter CAD file number. I don't think that's going to do much for us. Yeah, CAD has not received the file. Okay, so let's go back to the main here. Go back to codes. The other thing was Morse code. So you can actually translate Morse code here, because apparently there's supposed to be a Morse code message in the cassette tape. So if we had that, we could, put this in. And we're supposed to use the Commodore key to tap out the Morse code. So let's see if we can do this here. So yeah, it's basically a Morse code decoder here, which is actually kind of cool. It's actually kind of cool that the game does that. But it is a little finicky. If you go too fast, if you go too fast, it's just going to completely miss it. So do you have to kind of tap out each letter individually and then wait for it to pick that up, and then you can keep going with the next letter? Last thing you have are comms, and comms basically allows you to detain and question suspects or to capture and secure premises, and that's just something that where you kind of need to know who it is you're going after. Like, if we say detain and question suspect, well, we need to know their name, and we kind of don't have any names here, right? So yeah, there's really not a lot more we can do here, because this game really does rely on having all the extra bits that were included with it to be able to make any sort of progress. Not to mention, there is kind of a real-time aspect going on here. from what I understand, because I read about this a little after I realized this game was not going to be your typical Commodore 64 game, or maybe there were more games like this on the C64, but this does not seem like a typical game by any stretch. And when I was doing some quick research on this, I found out that not only was this game not really completely well received because of the fact that you spent a lot of time just waiting for things to happen, but from what I understand, there's not actually an end to the game. Apparently, what ends up happening is if you can get far enough into this thing to actually go through all of the suspects and everything and actually reach a conclusion that makes sense, it's still not technically a conclusion. And it would actually tell you to mail what you think is the appropriate answer to the developers. And it's like, that's like a cop-out ending almost. It's like you put the player through all this effort and then you don't even give them a proper ending. Oh, jeez. So yeah, that's basically all I can show you of The President is Missing. It's not remarkable in terms of being able to showcase it, but it was definitely novel in terms of its presentation and what it did. And it's not really something that's easy to show on a video here. Like, maybe if I had like all the materials, maybe we could dive deeper into it. But again, given the real-time element going on here, I don't think that'd make for a very exciting video.